Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining Devico Breakfast Bar. Thanks for finding time to record this episode. Could you please start by telling us about yourself and your professional background?
Sure. So my name is Mark Taylor. I am the CEO and co-founder of Warehouse Republic. It's a full-service third-party logistics company. I started Warehouse Republic with my business partner, Abby. I originally kind of ventured into entrepreneurship being an Amazon seller, like selling FBA products. And this was in 2015. And a few years later, we figured out that we needed to really kind of learn how to control our own supply chain stuff from the warehousing and staging and that kind of a thing. We looked around and there weren't a lot of people that wanted to work with us because we were so small at the time. And so we worked with kind of a friend of one of Abby's, and it immediately started going really, really well and helped us save a lot of money, a lot of expenses. And so I said, well, this might be interesting for other people. And so in 2018, I moved out to Southern California, and I was living in Austin at the time. I spent that time in Southern California really living on an air mattress for a little while we got the business up and running. I was living in the warehouse for a few months and then got up and running, and that was, like I said, we're going on 5-6 years now. So that's where we're at now. And so we've also have a second location. We've opened up, I think, around 2022. It's been a wild ride.
You deserved it.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing with us the story behind Warehouse Republic. What inspired you to start this venture, and what were some of the early challenges you faced besides the ones you shared?
I was always, even in the business of our FBA business, I was the one that was finding the freight forwarders and working with them and working at the time we would ship stuff to Austin, and I would store it in my little shed in the backyard. And so as many e-com sellers kind of get started out. And so I was always really like the logistics piece of it. And then you find that it's like it starts to grow very, very quickly and it becomes unsustainable or certainly uneconomical. And when I started figuring out the warehousing piece of it, I really liked it. My business partner at the time, he was very, very good at really immersing himself in the numbers and like learning the pay-per-click strategies and this and that. He was really good at staying on the cutting edge and knowing when to spend more with ads and this and that. It's a very unique skill set, I think. And for me, it was not something that I was very good at. And so when we started getting more into the warehousing piece, I really appreciate that, if you store a drink here and you move it over here, then you've moved it. And so, the way to think about it is if something comes in the warehouse, it has to leave the warehouse. Now, it could leave it in a number of ways, but it's a very visceral, warehousing to me it's very visceral, the physical nature of it, and I connect with that. And so that's really kind of what inspired me, or why I latched onto it and got a little bit more, into it.
Sounds great. Could you share a memorable success story or milestone moment from your journey with Warehouse Republic that stands out to you?
There are a lot.
For sure.
I think one of the most interesting things that I had a period of time, I was in a motorcycle accident and found myself in the hospital. And this was during the summer of 2021. And I didn't have to worry about anything. Like the systems and processes that we had in place meant that I could go and I could be out of the loop for a while and focused on nothing but, healing and that kind of a thing. And that was a really profound realization, and it gave me a great sense of pride. Then it was the first time I kind of was forced out of the situation and forced to see that we've actually created this thing now that's working on its own, and we've got people who have a sense of duty and ownership for it who aren't going to let it fall off the rails. And so it was really in that kind of moment that I realized that there was a thing that had become bigger than, what I had initially started in terms of process and that kind of thing. So, there are other goals, of course, but like that was kind of one of the most profound ones, and it wasn't something that I really expected, or it happened. And for me at that time, it came with a great sense of gratitude that we had done some things right.
Okay. You have a podcast where you talk to business leaders from different industries to gain insights, but how else do you stay on top of industry trends and events, and are there any particular valuable resources?
Supply chain's really interesting because they have some, I'm sure other industries do too, but I've been to, I think, to stay on top of technology and things like that. Firstly, I still talk to a lot of my podcast guests. I consider, BJ Patterson somebody who we talk, we speak a lot. We share stories with each other. There are a lot of great websites that don't aggregate, they actually produce, and they create articles. So Supply Chain Dive is one of them, and FreightWaves is another. The Wall Street Journal has a logistics section, and then there's other podcasts in the industry. And then of course LinkedIn becomes a really nice source of, as you get a little bit more ingrained in a particular industry, it turns out, 90% of your contacts are all related or very peripheral. And Ward Richmond has a great podcast, Keep On Trucking, or Trucking On, I believe. Anyway, and he has a combination, but there are a lot of places to get information, and supply chain really has been a very, very hot topic since, 2020 and, the pandemic. So those are
definitely.
A few of my sources. Yeah.
On a more personal note, what drives your passion for making the world more efficient, and how does this passion manifest in both your professional and personal invaders?
I think you get into entrepreneurship because it's like you have this belief of how you think the world should work. And I got into business, every business I've gotten into from being an e-commerce seller has been to service. I am my own customer. And that has helped me to, I know how I want to be treated as a customer, but I also know how I think things should work. And of course, you don't hit it all the time, but you certainly try to do it. And so I think entrepreneurs in many cases have this vision of how they see the world, and they decide, I'm going to do this company and this is going to be my version of how to serve. And so I think it comes back to like a service of others. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any professionals or leaders in your network who inspire you in your professional journey?
Yeah, of course. And in college, I had he was like an advisor. His name was Jim Wheeler, the University of Oklahoma, and he ran the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. Oklahoma had an entrepreneurship department, and he really took me under his wing, and we talked all the time. And when he knew I wanted to at the time I wanted to be an investment banker, and he sent me I went, and he got me a bunch of meetings with Oklahoma alumni that were just really, titans kind of Wall Street. Michael Price was one, Bill Comfort was another one at City Venture Capital. Mm-hmm. And, I went up there and I met with these guys among others, and they got me on the stock exchange floor at a time, post 9/11 when they weren't allowing people on the floor that, just anybody. And he was a good one. And then I attended an MBA program called the Acton School of Business, and every single professor there, whether it's Jeff Sandifer, Jeff Serra, Stephen Tomlinson, Jack Long, Phil Siegel, just to name a couple of them off the top of my head. But they were all very, very impactful. And so there are people in the industry, of course, like I look up to, but I think in my early days, it was certainly some of my educators, and most of those people had their own businesses. And John Penton is another one, and he ran multiple energy funds, and he was my first entrepreneurship teacher at University of Oklahoma.
How do you envision the future of third-party logistics solutions evolving, particularly in the context of advancements in technology and changing consumer behaviors?
Yeah. I think good operations and good operators are leaning a lot heavier on technology, whether it's using AI is almost a buzzword right now, but using more sophisticated automation techniques. But it's not automation in the sense of robotics that I'm talking about yet. I mean the automation of information. People relying more on put away functions and how to set up a warehouse, and where you should go and how to design your flows. Like that's becoming very, very a lot more interwoven with technology. And then once people kind of lean on every aspect of technology that you can with warehouse management system and your technology stack, then I think you're also starting to see a lot more of the actual investment going into robotic automation. And that could be ASRS systems, so it's like things that bring stuff to you, and the enhancement, the robots like Locust Robotics or Six River Systems, which I think is now Ocado. But like those chucks were like a good example of things, and there's all sorts of unique ways. I mean, I think the most interesting places are like automation, like robotics that take the suck out of jobs. So nobody likes unloading a container, and you're starting to see more and more robotics options or like solutions that allow for the unloading and even the loading of containers, like floor loading. And so I mean, I think we have with all the manual labor associated here, I mean, everybody's trying to get faster. We're trying to offset how hard it is to find people, like labor at this point. And then we're also trying to make it to where these jobs aren't just where you go, can't get a job somewhere else. I mean, I think the entire industry is trying to move toward logistics and supply chain jobs being better and better.
And cheaper.
Yeah, well, kind of. I think I don't look at it as cheaper. I actually trying to design our operations so we can have less human input, and then the human input that we do have is compensated better. Trying to create more sophisticated jobs and then let the automation, and this is a ways down the line, but we're trying to operate the warehouse with fewer employees, but the employees that are in here are, these are jobs that they want, and that, they actually have to compete for, not just going to a local talent agency, which is there's nothing wrong with that. I see that kind of going by the wayside.
Okay, great. Thanks for the response. Strategy, process deployment, and team building are listed as your core skills. How do you integrate these elements into the operation of Warehouse Republic, and what role do they play in ensuring the success of your company?
Right. So strategy, of course, is a lot of small tactical changes. Like, of course, you see the mountain on the horizon, and then you inspire the troops to go take that mountain, while also, looking around and seeing it's like making sure that that's still the right hill that you want to take. And then if it turns out that that's not the right hill you want to take, then you have to like keep everybody driving until you, and then midway through you say, actually, I was mistaken. This is the right hill to take. And so it's a bunch of small tactical things that drive strategy. And of course, strategy is, long term. Process implementation, there are some things in this industry where it's just like you see it and you immediately recognize we need this. And then there are other things in this industry where you're like, all right, we can get to there, but it's going to take a lot of small little iterative steps. And you don't change too many things unless the system is just completely broken. It's not a turnaround situation. It's an improvement situation, hopefully. And finally, for team building, like we do a lot of things. So, I mean, there's like, I love to cook. I love to do backyard style barbecues in the parking lot for the guys, with the guys and the team. We do book club, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but
my wife visits it every second week.
Yeah, so what we do is we pick a book as a team. We've done Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and that was a good, everybody, the buck stops with me, and then, but we also talk about like what that means to own and what you do and to be on the team. And then somebody's vacuuming outside the door. Anyway, right now we're on How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a classic book written a long time ago. And so what we do is we just read a chapter a week and sit around and have a round table and discuss it. As we grow, people can have different different pods of discussion and whatnot. And so it's like you don't want these groups to get too big. You're not going to sit around and have a round table with 50 people. But that's just one way. I mean, so it's like I think a lot of the food that we do, like a lot of the barbecues, like we'll provide all the burgers and such, and we'll just say, hey, anything else you guys want to bring, let's kind of do it potluck style. And the guys are always into it. So the team.
With your deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities faced by online retailers, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to enter the e-commerce and logistics industry?
If you're new and you don't have experience, go work for whoever's doing it best. And go in there, and I mean, it can mean even, there are a lot of, from my world, even going and working on the floor at Amazon for a few months is not going to be hard to get that job. You go in, you start seeing how things are done, you take best practices, and reasonably smart people will be able to you employ that 80-20 rule. Don't stay there too long, but give yourself a few months, maybe do it during busy season, do seasonal labor type deal. And then that gives you like a really good look at the e-com piece. And then maybe as another thing, you go and you look at, you do Walmart, maybe do a couple months there. I mean, you have to almost treat it as a journeyman type position where it's like you go to a few places. And then at that point, once you've seen how the best people do it, maybe move up the chain or down the chain. And until you feel like you understand like what you're really doing and how you're serving people. I think once you land in a place where you can learn on somebody else's dime, and you've got the great, the intense experiences, of course, are a few months, but like once you go to somewhere else, stay for a couple years maybe, and then at that point, then you move out. Then you maybe go your own way. But in terms of a career, I mean, learning from the best people you possibly can, and that's if you don't have experience. If you already have experience, then I mean, your experience is going to dictate how you jump into the pool.
Got it. As a leader, how do you ensure that your team remains adaptable and resilient in the face of unexpected challenges or market shifts?
Well, market shifts nobody sees coming. I mean, and so I think that is completely dependent upon leadership to see it and interpret it and then communicate it. And then I think how well your team receives it is the culture of the organization you've built. So if you build an organization where it's like, this is how we do it every single time, there's no differentiation, and you've just got a bunch of people that aren't curious or interested in, adapting, then that's a really hard sell. On the other hand, if you're constantly rotating people, or most people specialize, but after they've completed whatever the specialization tasks are for the day, they jump on other projects, you keep it interesting, and it's kind of a dynamic environment, which supply chain is very dynamic. And I think that's going to be a much better culture that's going to be able to adapt when somebody says, when the leader, the person setting the strategy says, this is, I know we're halfway up the hill, but now we got to go take this other hill because this is the one we have to take now. And going back to the leader or the person setting strategy, like if all you're doing is one week you're taking one hill and the next week you're taking the next hill and then the next week you're back to that's not a well-informed leader, or it's a little bit more impulsive. And now to say that, I mean, the overall strategy is how to move products more efficiently, more to the need of the customer for as cheaply as possible, while still making a profit, an acceptable profit. And that's always going to be, number one. And I think a lot of that becomes, what do you want to be when you grow up? So as a logistics company, like who are you serving really being defined, like very defined about that. So, but we do live in this world, from an information perspective, if you're in a tech company, the speed with which you're moving after these targets and like pivoting and stuff like that can be very, very quick. Even as an e-commerce seller, it's like, a lot of people got their start on Amazon FBA or being a third-party seller using Fulfilled by Amazon. But now, some of the most successful sellers have diversified onto other platforms, and there's a new platform with potentially new requirements. It's like, it's not exactly FBA, but you can't send in a pallet that's more than this height or more than this weight, and this is how you have to label. And those are just, setting the processes in your warehouse and making sure the documentation is good. But as an e-commerce seller, you're constantly figuring out, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? Okay, well, now it's TikTok commerce, but next week it's live commerce. It's ever evolving, and it happens very, very fast. And of course, as everybody's witnessing the AI wave, it's just changed the game for so many things, like how do we consume art, how do we create art, how do we write emails, how are we writing books, that kind of thing. And there's still, I think, a premium for well thought out art and writers and things like that, but AI has made a lot of the creative tasks in the world just so much more accessible to average people.
Yeah, totally agree. Collaboration, excellence, and growth are emphasized as part of the culture at Warehouse Republic. How do you cultivate these values within your team, and why are they important to the company's overall mission?
It's all in culture setting. It's what you measure and how you set the culture in the company. And so Excellence can be, I mean, like when you say excellence, like there are a couple metrics that come to mind. So like accuracy of orders and speed with which you do it. And then finally, damaged products or mistakes. So it's like if you're tracking those things and you constantly, there's a saying, it's like your team, your team effectively performs to what you measure. And so you just have to, you pick the right metrics for one, and then two, you have to be very involved in making sure that your team cares. And you understand that, we have the conversation with our team. It's like, our customers trust us with their business, and this is, we are a non-negotiable for them. I mean, if it's not us, it's going to be somebody else, but this component, this aspect, like the way they do business, is they have to. And so if they're going to pick us, and we have such a critical role in their performance as a company, then we have to treat their business as our business, because it is. You just constantly have that conversation. It's ongoing, and for the people that it doesn't resonate, they're not a good fit, and they don't stay for long. And
many companies struggle with the scarcity of tech talents. How have you navigated this challenge, and what innovative approaches or programs have you implemented to attract and retain skilled professionals?
Sure. So we have two things. The best source for us is we offer referral bonuses for our team. So it's like if we want to hire a couple guys, then in the morning stand-up meetings we'll say, hey, we're looking for 4 or 5 guys, we're looking for this, we're looking for that, and we put it out to the team. And the team, if they refer somebody, then there's a cash bonus that we pay to them through our payroll company. And those guys effectively, they get a certain amount, and then the person if they make it 90 days, of course, this is contingent on them coming on and making it 90 days. But after the 90 days, there's an amount that the employee gets. Think of it as like a starting incentive bonus type thing. And then the person who referred them also gets some money. So that has been the biggest, that has worked the best for us.
How scalable is it?
I think it's fairly scalable. I think it's because, I mean, as you have a larger team, you've got more sources for referral. And people, especially, I mean, if you've got a really good teammate, and they're coming to you and they're saying, and I mean, they've over months, years, whatever it may be, they just consistently carry themselves in a good manner. And you're like, I want more of that guy. Well, the old adage, birds of a feather flock together. So if this guy is recommending a potential teammate, I'm going to look at that guy a lot harder because there's social proof already associated. It's like, okay, if you know this guy, then, and this guy and the guy who's on the team vouches for him, that goes a whole lot, to me, that almost goes further than just an interview alone. So if I have a guy and he doesn't have a bad interview, but he doesn't have a great interview, and then I've got a guy that has a great interview, but the guy who did okay was recommended, I'm still probably going to go with the guy who was recommended just because there's that social proof. And especially if that person speaks highly of him, says, look, I've worked with him before, he's a great worker, on time, shows up consistent, that kind of thing.
Could you share how your development team in your current project is structured? And have you ever outsourced your technical needs, programming, quality assurance, any kind of development technical to external outsourcing vendor?
Yeah, so this is where, picking a good business partner who complements your deficiencies, if we'll say, is really good, because Abi's been my business partner's been in the tech world for a long time, and he's run development teams that, people in the Ukraine, he's had people who are in South America, Central America. And so when it comes time for us to do any kind of development, because most of the stuff that we do as a warehouse is off the shelf, like our warehouse management system is extensive and we use it. We use some other systems, Zendesk for a ticketing system. We have had to build very few things internally, but there are some things we've done, like we've built label little programs that, they don't look pretty at all, but they serve a purpose for our customers to make compliant labels so we can scan everything when it comes in. So like those little things, when that comes up, Abi will reach out to his network, and it's usually, developers that he's worked with, or we actually do a lot of, I don't particularly, this is not a knock to consultants at all. Some of my dear friends are consultants. They're very, very smart, talented people. I find that consultants, like when I want to hire somebody, I look at a consultant as, if I've got this very, very specific thing I want to figure out, I will find somebody who is an expert in that, and I will hire them to coach and consult. And so that's a lot of way. But for the tech piece, like the actual programming stuff, most of that has been found or like developed by Abi, who's pulling from all of his previous relationships.
Okay. Do you know when he wants to outsource or he doesn't have enough required skills, expertise? What are the precise factors to do so except finding an expert? If consider that you're having an expert or you can hire it internally, in-house, whether you want to outsource. What are these factors to?
Social proof is a big one. So we've gone to look for web developers that develop in a code or a language that maybe he doesn't have a contact who's very strong, or that contact's busy. If you go to a place like, Upwork just as an example, they've got the nice things where it's like, it'll say, okay, well, success rate, and they've got these people qualify, this is how many hours have been done by them, access like examples of work. And then of course, it's also in the way you write the job description. Like you say, all right, this is the industry I'm in. These are the aspects of what we want done. Here are examples of other companies that have done this. Because rarely anything that we're doing is just, no one else has it. I mean, it's usually our version of something. And so that ends up being, I think it's very specific in finding somebody who's got the talent, who's got examples of work, and who's available. And we interview everybody. Like, we want to make sure that there's a level of competency. We avoid agencies because agencies will typically have your top level, very well-spoken person talk to you. And then after that, we really try to make sure that we're actually working directly with the developer.
Have you ever worked with developers directly through agency? Talking to them to let them participate in your meetings, daily stand-ups, and so on?
No, of course we found it useful.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, no. Look, at the end of the day, even if it's this isn't to knock an agency, I just say, and I should have said it differently. What I mean is, if we're going to work, like when we find a tech professional, we want to have access to the actual programmer. Like what we want is, we don't want to where I'm like in this example, I'm speaking with you and then you're talking to whoever's got the project that day. We want to make sure that like start to finish, it's the same person. They understand, they hear, they recognize. It's like they can communicate at a level where it's like when we're trying to communicate something, they can communicate back like that, that kind of thing.
Okay, got it. What are the benefits and drawbacks of outsourcing? How do you think?
Yeah, benefits, of course. The whole reason why people go for outsourcing is it's cheaper typically. And so, but I would say
it might be expensive.
It can certainly be expensive, but I think in many cases, if you're willing to go, say it like this, if you're only willing to hire internal, then like this is your pool. Like this is your pool of people and talent to look from. If you're willing to outsource, then the entire world becomes your pool. And I can, with almost 100% certainty, you might find the best person in your small pool here for your team and the way you communicate and the way you work. That's fine. But there are people equally talented, and you're just opening up and they all have different prices and they all have different levels of engagement. And if the person you think is perfect, that's like within this little thing is competing, working on competing projects, because they certainly will be if they're very good. Maybe you find somebody hungry that's in another country that has the bandwidth now. And so it's just like, it's really just giving yourself so much more of a shot of getting what you want for the price you want on a timeline you want. Okay,
got it. How do you measure the success of collaboration with an IT outsourcing vendor?
For collaboration success, it's like, did I get it done? Like, did the project get done? Does it function? For things like, we did a website redesign a while ago, and we were very, very pleased with how it went. But at the end of it, it's so many moving parts. It's like you miss placeholder stuff. So, it wasn't on the main page, it wasn't on the secondary page, but if you click down into the third level, at the very bottom, there was, some Latin still in there that was like still a placeholder. And 2 months later, we reach back out and say, hey, just out of curiosity, we realized that this wasn't taken care of. Can you please go in and fix that? And the programmer was like, sure. And then it was immediately done. We didn't have to renegotiate the contract. We didn't have to do anything. They were good about the aftercare, basically, of, oh, we all missed that. That wasn't intentional, and here you go. Whereas I think that was a very successful example, because it's like you've got somebody it's almost like a guarantee of work, and it's like we found a bug later on, and they still came back and fixed it because it was something they could very, very easily do, just a few minutes, and didn't really try to charge us anymore.
Makes sense. As we wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give to the other companies considering IT outsourcing?
There are a couple things. Like, if you've never done it before, then I think that understanding, like, you're going to have to really work. Like, you're not going to have the best situation. You're going to get frustrated if you're not willing to do early morning meetings or late evening meetings from time to time, because when people are on different time zones, there's got to be a willingness to flex and a willingness to kind of try to meet people where they are. Like, so you're not, you can't expect, I would never expect our people, like anybody I've ever worked with, to, meet with me at 2 p.m. Central Time, like, especially if that's 3 a.m. their time. So there's give and take with doing it. And I think, making sure that you check the work that you think you want done. People have got to have, you've got to develop a rapport with people. You have to be able to talk to these people, and eventually I think there's a high need to make sure that either the agent you're working with, or preferably the developer you're working with, understands exactly what you're trying to convey, and not only says they get it, but demonstrates that they can achieve what you're looking for. And you want to see them have that light bulb go off that says, where you're comfortable with, okay, clearly they're going to be able to do what I'm asking. I'm not asking anything crazy. And then also, for most of the technology related things that I envision as an operator, if it's not already on the shelf, you're probably not asking for something crazy complex or groundbreaking. So outsourcing is probably a very, very good option. For people who are, of course, wanting to innovate technology, then that's a much more involved situation, and I would want that person on the team. So if this is things that, for instance, here would be a good example. So we want our customers to be able to import their boxes, and a pallet configurator says this is how many boxes can fit on your pallet. So if you're sending us 10,000 of these boxes, this is going to be 150 pallets. All right, great. That is something that somebody can very easily. There are defined parameters, they can program it for you, and they can then make it look nice. But if you're saying, if you want to do something that is then connected to all sorts of different things and is trying to iterate design of your product, or it's making packing recommendations, something that's never been created, then that's something you definitely need to, I would say, go work through an agency. And highly complex, never been seen in the market, nobody's doing it. That's probably starting your own company, building your own team.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Mark. We covered a few very interesting topics, and I'm sure it will be valuable for the auditory of Devico Breakfast Bar. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you found time to join, and wishing you all the best and extreme growth, success to Warehouse Republic.
Yeah.
You're doing nice things.
Thank you so much, Oleg. I really appreciate the invitation. It was a very, very fun chat.